Yeah, moving on to another type of quality. Assembly Member Garratt is going to talk about speeds and reliability.
Hello. Yeah, I think we've perhaps touched on this a bit already, but about the measures in the bus action plan to improve journey times and connections. So I don't know if you want to start with that, Emma, but whether you think, we've heard a lot about the issues, whether you think the plan in the bus action plan is going to address those about the speed and about the connections, which of course is also a speed factor from the passenger's point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, as I've said before, the focus on bus journey times is really welcome, but will require really good collaboration with the boroughs, which hasn't been happening as well as it should do up until now. And TfL admit that, and I think they are committed to improving that situation. In terms of connectivity, in the part of that's got the slowest kind of delivery time in the bus action plan. So that is obviously you can't do everything at once, but it is of concern, and we hope that maybe if more funding could come into TfL, that they might be able to accelerate that bit a bit more. That's around kind of improving connections between buses and other modes of transport. But essentially, we're pretty kind of confident about what's in the bus action plan, as long as the money can be found to do it. And we also really appreciate the emphasis on the bus network being part of an integrated public transport system. So this TfL's kind of whole corridor approach to planning for the bus, cycling and walking improvements jointly, we think is going to be really beneficial for the bus, but for other users as well. So it's really good to see the bus being fully and firmly recognised as part of active travel.
Okay, Silviya, did you want to add anything on that about the connections and journey times and speeds?
I was going to make the same point that Emma did about working together with boroughs, and I don't have the answer to that, but how can we increase boroughs' willingness to implement bus lanes locally as well on local roads? It's a much bigger question about road space allocation and prioritizing of public transport ahead of private cars and private vehicles. Obviously, with the provision of maintaining provision to a certain extent for everyone. On the 4% service reduction, another point I was going to make that the question about is there an opportunity to streamline services in central London and whether shorter routes would actually improve punctuality. I think that's a technical question that perhaps we need to consider when revising routes. So avoiding too much overlap in central London and enabling that sort of process of streamlining, and then perhaps that would enable greater investment in routes where in those underserved areas.
I mean, on the connections point, I know certainly in my patch, the changes that are proposed and actually changes that have already happened, there is a move, it seems to me, towards having shorter routes and more changes, which probably helps punctuality and maybe has some operational benefits as well. But obviously, as we've spoken about before, having to change a bus, especially with all the, let's not rehash all those difficulties, but they're quite real to people. You get on the bus, you're finally moving, and then you have to stop and change. So I don't know whether you see that creating an additional barrier either to people to getting on in the first place or to people. I'll come to you in a second, Katie, but I don't know whether you perceive that as a growing problem.
We recognize it's a give and take situation, and it's something I think that it's difficult to talk about this in the general. You need to consider specific issues on specific changes to the routes.
Okay.
My point is about sort of avoiding too much duplication of services and whether that enables efficiency savings and punctuality improvements and journey time improvements that are also beneficial. But that's why I said it's a technical point that will need to be considered at the time.
Okay. Sorry, Katie, were you indicating to say something on that? Or
just a really quick point, there are obviously accessibility barriers, which we've already discussed around connections. But one thing that can be changed is to ensure that if there absolutely must be a change of bus, that bus change happens at the same bus stop rather than requiring people to walk further down, identify another bus stop, often crossing a road, which is far more difficult and inaccessible.
I think that's a very good point. Yeah, I've been campaigning on that in Purley, where some bus stops which are notionally near each other are about 6 traffic lanes apart. It's a really awful place for a bus interchange. but on a map it maybe looks convenient. I saw, Dan, you had your hand up.
Yes, I have a few points here to catch up on. We have a mention of slow journey times. It was interesting, the data that come available about journey times increased during the pandemic because there was less traffic. Now, as a bus driver in North London, that was very obvious to me and all other bus drivers that the roads were clear, and we could go to terminus quite quickly, and it was a very efficient service. But now the traffic's starting to come back, we're starting to get the same old problems again. Traffic delays. We need to tackle the problem of traffic in the city. We need to be pretty urgent about it, because whatever we do with the transport, the traffic's going to cause problems, because there's always delays. You get delays on the buses, it puts people off because it takes such a long time to sit in the bus and see people walking past, and the walkers are getting there before they are, and it's just frustrating and annoying, and it puts a lot of people off. I think to go back to another previous point about contacting outer boroughs, transport should contact the outer boroughs and arrange park and ride schemes all around major entries into the city, and encourage people, drivers, to park in the outer London and use our wonderful service in London to get where they want to be. And if they charge reasonable prices, people will go to that, because that's an excellent way to see London. If you can find a decent car park there all day, buy a bus pass or use your Oyster card, you can travel all over London at your leisure. And if we get enough people participating in this all around London, then that's bound to reduce the traffic going into London. And to further go with that, we could make higher charges for people that use it, they still use it, the central London, because we don't want unnecessary journeys in London when they can use their transport system. So we need to encourage people to travel on the transport from outer London and discourage people from using inner London, if that's at all possible. And also, there's one or two other points we need to catch up on. Sorry about this. Audio announcement. On the underground, we have an regular announcement saying, this is the Piccadilly line going to Cockfosters. The next station is Southgate. And we could easily have that same system on the buses. So people with disabilities and audio and visual thing could catch up on the regular announcement on the bus saying, this is the 263 going to Archway. The next bus stop is whatever it is. And everybody knows what's happening. And again, we could have the technologies there for delays and accidents and diversions could be announced on the bus, so people have a chance to possibly replan their route or even turn around and go back and try on a different day. There's a lot of little things that can help. And there was a mention a while back about bus fare evaders. More should be done with driver training to catch up on fare evaders, but the driver can only do so much. People get on, they're having to say, fares, please. And if they don't, they just go past and say, excuse me, can we pay your fare? But people just want to ignore that. And there's nothing the bus driver can do. He can only ask for the fares. But there is a technology, it can have a button in the car, just to press this button and tell the controllers that people are evading the fares in this area. And they can pinpoint that and say, oh, we'll get some inspectors out there and check for fare evaders. Simple solutions can solve a lot of problems. And one of the main problems in the city at the moment is traffic congestion. And cycle lanes are popping up everywhere, and some of the cycle lanes are using half the main road and causing more congestion. The traffic sitting in this congestion, pushing out more fumes, causing more pollution. And they've got these great ideas which would be very useful in a year or two, but at the moment there's too much traffic to make that work properly. We need to do something urgently about the traffic in London. There's just too much of it, and it's holding everybody up, and it's just causing too much hassle. and too many delays and too many disgruntled passengers. Sorry, carry on.
Thanks, Dan. I was going to ask you what you thought about the proposed measures on bus speeds and so on, but I think you've probably made that very clear. I was going to make an observation as well about park and ride. I found, as a person representing Outer London, I found that very difficult to get off the ground, because the park and ride either has to be just inside London, in which case TfL don't seem very keen on it, because that would bring traffic into London, even though the intention is to buffer it coming further in. And if you put it just outside London, it appears as if that world doesn't exist. And just beyond the curb line of what then becomes Surrey in my case. So actually, I think TfL's approach to reducing cars actually makes park and ride schemes quite difficult. They seem to be not interested in it because they think it would be just increase car traffic. I was going to ask you about sort of bus speeds. I don't know whether drivers find, obviously that there is a plan, a long-term plan to have all of the red route network change to 20 miles per hour to improve safety. I don't know whether that's having an impact on bus speeds or timetable pressures, or whether timetables are adjusted to reflect that. Is that something drivers are aware of?
Yes, 20 mile an hour is quite a decent speed. If we can go 20 mile an hour for end to end, that would be good. But the trouble is traffic delays again. And, we could deal with more bus lanes, more bus priority. If we can get the buses moving from end to end, 20 mile an hour, that's fine. But the trouble with it is we end up in a traffic jam, and we just sit there waiting for the traffic to move, and it's frustrating, and makes people angry sometimes.
Apologies, can I just interrupt, because I'm sorry, I'm the chair of the meeting. We are having real difficulty hearing Dan at the moment. You've got quieter since earlier. If you could speak a bit more closely to your mic. We've also asked the technical people in the room to try and turn up our own microphones. Sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's the accent doesn't help me. That is from the northern accent, but I'll try my best. The 20 mile an hour is fine, but the trouble is traffic delays, traffic holdups, and pollution. And at the moment, these cycle lanes that have popped up generally aren't working too well in some areas, and they're causing more traffic pollution because traffic, are building up and stuck in these traffic jams. And this pollution, there's just more pollution from the traffic. It's just not working in some areas. But anyway, yeah, carry on.
Thanks, Dan. If it's any consolation, I can hear perfectly clearly what you're saying in your actions. No problem at all. I was just going to ask the other. Sorry, Sarisa. I don't know whether you wanted to add anything to the issue about connections and so on. Or I think we did speak about that before. Whether you had anything you wanted to add?
No, like I said before, that would deter a lot of blind partially sighted people from taking a journey if they find they have to change, especially as mentioned by Katie, if you have to cross the road or go around the corner. It's also the little things like if you have to find a bus stop and the bus stop, your TfL app TfL Go app says to go to bus stop A, but the bus stop A is at the top of a pole that you just can't see if you have useful vision. So it's just about those little barriers which will just make you either not go, take the train, or take a private car.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that was it, Chair. Thanks.